The moment he walked into my office, I knew something was off. New guy, young, stiff, fresh from a consulting firm or whatever. He had the typical vibe: crisp suit, fake confidence, and that calculated, almost rehearsed look in his eyes. "Rachel, I'll get right to it," he said, like I'd care about any pleasantries. "Effective immediately, we're letting you go." It hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I wasn't surprised. The writing had been on the wall ever since the board brought him in. He looked at me like he expected an outburst or some kind of emotional reaction. But I didn't give him that. I nodded slowly. "Okay." He didn't even have the decency to offer an explanation or a reason. Just a bland, rehearsed sentence about new direction, company restructuring, and vision. I didn't ask why. I already knew. He had no idea what I did here. None of them did. I stood up, grabbed my things, no rush, just methodical, and slipped my phone into my bag. He kept talking, something about severance, something about HR. I wasn't listening. "Good luck," I said, my voice sharp but calm. Then I left. As I walked past the bullpen, I felt the weight of it, the years, the silent whispers, the side glances from the people who used to be my team. No one said anything. No one even made eye contact. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was that they didn't know how to care. I was just another piece of furniture here, after all. I reached the exit, caught my reflection in the glass doors. No fanfare, no tears. Just a woman who'd spent 18 years building something. And now I was walking away from it. The parking lot felt bigger than I remembered. The silence was deafening. I started my car and drove off, the office shrinking in the rearview mirror. Something told me this wasn't over, though. I'd walked out, but I could already feel the weight of the storm that was coming. I parked the car in my driveway, sat there for a moment, and just stared at the house. It felt like I'd just left behind a different life, one that didn't involve doing the dirty work no one else wanted to. 18 years. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Not with some kid in a suit pushing me out the door like I was an obsolete printer. I thought about the stuff I'd done for them, the stuff no one ever asked about, the work that kept this place running when it looked like it might fall apart. I'd fixed their supply chain when it was a mess, twice. I'd dealt with vendor fraud issues no one ever heard about, cleaned up someone else's mistake when they couldn't even admit there was a problem. I kept the system from crashing when they didn't know how to keep it alive. Hell, I was the one who kept it all working. And that was the part that stung. They never bothered to ask how I did it. Never cared. I built the logistics optimization system from the ground up. Not just a simple database or some basic tool. It was adaptive, complex, layered. It handled restocking, vendor forecasting, and a whole host of other things. Real-time updates, predictive modeling, critical decisions were based on it. I was the one who understood how it worked. Every algorithm, every adjustment, but no one ever asked. It wasn't like I was hiding it. It wasn't intentional, not at first. I was just never brought in on any conversations about who would replace me, how the system worked, or what would happen when I left. They'd always assumed I'd be there. They just assumed. I sighed, stepped out of the car, and walked inside. I set my bag on the counter and went straight to my home office. I'd been anticipating this moment. Before I'd even left the office, I set up remote monitoring for the system. Not because I expected them to screw things up right away, but because I knew it was only a matter of time. There was too much relying on that system for them to just move on like it was nothing. I logged into my home system, checked the access attempts. The first signs were there, nothing major, just a couple of failed logins, some strange queries. The confusion hadn't spread too far yet, but it would. I knew that much. They'd start poking around, trying to figure out how it worked, what it did, and why it was so damn vital. And when they realized it was built on my credentials, built on the assumption that I'd always be the one to maintain it, well, that's when the panic would set in. I watched the attempts pile up, one after another. Nothing serious yet, just people trying to get in without the right access, but I could feel it. This was the beginning of something much bigger. I knew the chaos was coming. The system wasn't just a tool. It was the backbone of their operations. Without it, they couldn't make decisions, couldn't forecast, couldn't restock. And they didn't even understand how deep it went. I did. I always had. They had no idea what was about to hit them. But I did. By Monday morning, I already knew how this was going to play out. I sipped my coffee, listening to the hum of my old coffee maker, a familiar, almost comforting sound. I could feel the pulse of things starting to go south. I'd set up alerts for any unusual activity in the system. And sure enough, by the time I was finishing my first cup, the first few failed login attempts started hitting my backup monitor. Nothing aggressive yet, just the confused stabs of people trying to get in without knowing how. At some point, those attempts would stop being attempts and turn into panic. I'd been there too many times myself to miss the signs. The new COO, who was barely a week into his job, had the first of many uncomfortable meetings scheduled with the ownership team that morning. The logistics reports, his first real test, were supposed to be on deck. The reports were tied to my system, his system now, I guess, but they had no idea how it worked. It was too intricate for the uninitiated, and that was always the problem. By 9 a.m., I could practically feel the tension creeping out of the conference room. I knew they'd run into problems right away. The reports weren't going to load properly. The data would be stale, maybe years old. The system would throw up errors and just freeze. I could already see it in my head, hear the murmurs of confusion. I wasn't wrong. By the time my phone buzzed with a couple of messages from old coworkers still inside the company, I knew they were deep in it. Rachel, one of them, wrote, "Reports are shot, feeds are broken, data is all old. Are you seeing this? Can't log in either." I smiled to myself and checked my monitor again. More failed attempts, same usernames. The new guy was trying everything. He didn't know where to start, which made it even worse. I could feel the panic rippling through the team. I heard the familiar beep of an internal chat thread lighting up, one I'd set to notify me. "Who has access to the system?" someone typed, followed by, "Anyone know who built this thing? It's not loading, and the forecast is useless." I leaned back in my chair, taking another sip of coffee. This was going exactly as I thought it would. They had no idea how much they were relying on something they barely understood. This system wasn't just a tool. It was the lifeblood of the whole operation. They thought they could plug in new leadership and coast. I'd warned them without ever saying a word. The new guy was in over his head. He didn't have the knowledge to navigate it. He was a consultant, and consultants don't usually know how to manage what they don't understand. He was learning that the hard way. At 11 a.m., the chaos was no longer confined to the conference room. Someone had already escalated the problem to the junior managers. The whispers were getting louder. A few of them were calling IT, asking why the system kept locking them out. They couldn't even view inventory levels or the delivery schedules. It wasn't a sync issue. It was something deeper. And it was becoming clearer by the minute that they didn't know the half of it. A new message came in from my backup monitor. Another failed login attempt. It was starting, the scramble. Everyone would be talking about it soon. Everyone except the one person who knew exactly how to fix it. By midday, I had enough. I wasn't about to jump back in there to help. Let them dig their own hole. I knew what they were dealing with, and I didn't need to hear it firsthand. They'd come to me eventually, but I didn't have to be there for the panic. I just let it unfold, reading the error logs from the comfort of my kitchen, knowing this wasn't just a glitch anymore. By mid-afternoon, the quiet panic had turned into full-blown chaos. The new COO called a leadership sync, trying to get everyone on the same page about the supplier renegotiation. This was supposed to be a big win for him, a chance to prove he could lead the charge on a critical project. But it was obvious that he didn't have a clue how to even begin. I watched from home as the meeting kicked off. I could practically hear his voice cracking through the screen when the first slide failed to load. He clicked through a couple more, trying to load the updated projections. Nothing. Just blank screens, and those ugly error messages I knew so well. He jabbed at the keyboard a few more times, getting frustrated. The reports, the ones tied to my system, weren't there. They wouldn't load because they couldn't. The forecast was stuck in a loop of outdated data, frozen in the past. With a sigh that probably echoed in the room, he decided to take the shortcut. He started copying old projections into a PowerPoint, shoving them around like they were fresh. He even slapped a label on them that read "Optimized Forecasts." I could already feel the eyes on him, the tension building, people unsure if they should call him out or let him stumble through it. But one of the mid-level managers wasn't having it. "These numbers don't look right," they said quietly, almost too softly, but loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Where's the updated data? The system's not even pulling anything." The COO stiffened, his face going from red to pale in seconds. He didn't have an answer, not a real one. But instead of admitting there was a problem with the system, he dismissed the concern. "It's just some outdated code," he said, waving it off. "Legacy stuff. It's a glitch. We'll get it synced up." But I knew what was really going on. The system wasn't just glitching, it was locked out. The manager didn't push the issue any further, but you could tell the discomfort was growing. People in the room knew something was wrong. They were waiting for someone to fix it. And no one was stepping up. I could hear the faint hum of IT notifications buzzing in the background. There was no denying it now. The system had been half-locked for hours, but this was the point of no return. The error message was now explicit. "Access denied. Auth R. Chen." The COO had no clue. The new guy was fumbling, but it wasn't his fault. No one had told him the truth about how the system worked. It had always been my baby, my responsibility, but now it was a ticking time bomb, and I was the only one who could defuse it. As the meeting dragged on, IT's response finally came through. "The system requires biometric ID to access." I could imagine the looks on their faces when they realized what that meant. All those failed login attempts, all those errors, all the frustration, none of it was a coincidence. They were locked out, and the one person who could get them back in was me. I sat back in my chair, watching it unfold from a distance, knowing they'd be on the phone with me soon. The new COO, the leadership team, they were going to have to come crawling, but I wasn't in a hurry to answer. I had just set my coffee mug down and started picking at a puzzle I'd been avoiding for months when my phone buzzed again. It was a message from one of the junior managers who'd been on the call earlier. "Rachel, you watching the quarterly? It's a train wreck." I leaned back, looked at the half-finished puzzle in front of me, and sighed. I could already guess where this was going. The quarterly financial review with outside investors had started a little while ago. The COO was stumbling through the slides, doing everything he could to keep the illusion of competence alive. The projections, the ones that should have been updated and ready, were completely missing. There was no fresh data, no real forecasts. I could hear the frustration in the COO's voice, even through a text. He was trying to bluff, trying to pass off recycled visuals from previous quarters, throwing in a couple of made-up numbers to cover the gaps. It wasn't going well. The tension was palpable. And then, like the inevitable crack in the dam, it happened. One of the investors, the one with the sharpest eye, pointed out the error message that had been hanging over everything since the morning. "Access denied. Auth R. Chen." The investor didn't miss a beat. "Who the hell is R. Chen?" the partner asked, his voice rising just enough for everyone to hear. The room went quiet. I could feel the ripple effect even from here. That one question cracked the whole thing open. "Why are we seeing this?" the partner pressed, his gaze flicking between the COO and the rest of the room. "Who terminated her? Where's the backup plan?" the COO stammered. It's just a technical issue, a glitch with the system. We're working on it. We're fixing it." The partner didn't buy it. "A glitch?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You mean you fired someone without a backup plan?" That's when the silence shifted. The investor was getting more and more uncomfortable, and it wasn't just the partner anymore. Everyone in the room started looking at each other. No one knew what to say. They all depended on the system. They didn't realize until now that it was held together by one person, me. In the back of my mind, I could almost hear the panic building. The ownership group was suddenly realizing they were flying blind. They'd been told everything was fine, that the new guy had things under control. But the truth was slowly crawling to the surface, and it wasn't pretty. I could picture the COO's face as he tried to come up with an answer that didn't make him look completely incompetent. He wasn't doing well. And then, the punchline. Legal spoke up. "There's no documentation of a knowledge transfer," they said flatly. "No plan for succession. No handover of responsibilities or credentials." There it was, the final nail in the coffin. Legal wasn't just confirming the failure, they were calling it out as a legal risk. I didn't need to see the look on the COO's face to know what was happening. I could feel the weight of it from here. He was caught. They were all caught. The system was mine, and they had no clue what it actually took to run it. I smiled to myself, just a little. Not out of any sense of victory, but because I'd known this moment was coming. I'd spent 18 years keeping everything together, anticipating problems they'd never see coming. And now I was just watching it unfold, from a distance, like a quiet observer in the background. The calls would come soon enough. They had no choice but to reach out. But for now, I just focused on the pieces of the puzzle in front of me, the one thing I could still control. The rest, well, it was theirs to figure out. I didn't hear from anyone for the next few hours. The silence was almost deafening, but I wasn't surprised. I knew what was happening. The COO was scrambling, trying to save face in front of the investors, trying to figure out how to get the numbers he was missing. But I could picture him now, alone in his office, texting anyone who might know how to reach me. I wasn't answering the phone. Not yet. I wasn't going to make this easy for them. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a screenshot from one of my former coworkers, someone who'd been with me through most of the mess and who knew how to read the room. "Hey," the message said. "He's panicking. He's texting everyone looking for your contact info. Wants to know how to get the system back up." I laughed quietly to myself. So, he was fishing for answers. No surprise there. They didn't get it. They never did. I didn't just build the system. I was the system. I'd made sure of it, designed it in a way that left no room for error, but also no room for anyone to figure it out once I was gone. Another message came in. This one was from a junior manager who'd been on the calls earlier. "Rachel, they're asking if you can walk them through how it works. They can't get anything to load." I ignored it for a while. They could sweat. They could figure it out. Then, around 6 p.m., the next message came in. This one wasn't from a coworker. It was from the CEO. "Rachel, call me." I wasn't going to jump at it right away. I knew what this was. It wasn't a friendly check-in. This was the moment when they finally understood the depth of the mistake they'd made. I took a deep breath, set the puzzle pieces aside, and dialed his number. The CEO answered on the second ring. His voice was tight, strained. "Rachel," he said, as if he was holding himself together by a thread. "I need to know how to fix this." I didn't say anything right away. I just listened, the weight of everything finally hitting him. He'd known there was a problem, but now it was real. It wasn't just a glitch. It was a catastrophe. "I don't understand," he continued, his voice softer now. "Why didn't we have a backup? Why didn't you leave any documentation?" I could hear the panic in his voice, even though he was trying to keep it together. This was it. This was the point of no return. The moment he realized just how much he'd lost, how fragile everything had been. "You didn't ask," I said, keeping my tone steady. No one ever asked. I wasn't included in those conversations. I could hear him sigh, like the weight of it was finally sinking in. "Okay," he said, his voice quieter now. "So what do we need to do to fix it?" I let the silence hang there for a moment. He needed to understand that I wasn't just going to walk him through it. Not after everything. Not after how they'd dismissed me. "You need me," I said simply. "The system runs on my biometrics, my encryption key. It's locked to me." There was a long pause. I could almost hear him running the numbers in his head, trying to reconcile the situation. He had to understand now that it wasn't just about a few missing files. This was the lifeblood of the company. Without it, they were dead in the water. "How much time do we have?" he asked, voice tight. "Not much," I said, finally giving him something. "A couple of days maybe, but not long." I knew it was more than that, more than just a technical fix. This was leverage, plain and simple. The CEO took a deep breath. "What will it take to get you back?" I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The house felt too quiet. "Same role," I said, "but I report directly to you. No COO in the chain. I need to be in charge of the system. No interference." There was a beat of silence, and I knew what was coming. He wasn't going to like it. "Fine," he said, the word coming out like a concession rather than agreement. "Done. Just come back. Please, we need you." I could feel the weight of it, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a triumphant smile. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this because I'd built something irreplaceable, and they'd thrown it away without a second thought. I exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle in. "Okay," I said. "I'll be there in the morning." I hung up without another word. The phone rang once, twice. I let it go to voicemail, knowing who it was. The CEO was probably pacing in his office, his nerves fraying by the second. He was desperate, and desperation made people do things they wouldn't normally do. I wasn't in any rush to answer. It rang again. I sighed, set the puzzle down, and picked up. "Rachel," he said, his voice rough, tired. He didn't bother with pleasantries. There was no need. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say, but we need you back." I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. It wasn't the apology I'd expected, but it was close enough. He was humble, at least. Or at least trying to sound humble. He'd seen how far the ship had drifted without me at the helm. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. What had happened, what was happening, was a result of their own oversight. I wasn't going to rub it in. Not yet. But I also wasn't going to make this easy for him. "What do you need exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "I need you to come back, please," he said quickly, a little too quickly. "I know we messed up. We thought we had everything in place, but we don't. We need you to fix this." I paused, letting the silence settle. I could feel the tension on the other end of the line. He was waiting for me to make some grand gesture or some offer to come back with open arms. I wasn't doing that. Not after everything. "You need me, sure," I said, keeping it blunt. "But I'm not coming back the way things were before." He exhaled, a long, resigned breath. "What's it going to take, Rachel?" I laid it out, no hesitation. "Same role, but this time, I report directly to you. No COO in my chain of command. I'm the one in charge of the system. I handle the logistics. No interference." The silence on the other end was thick, but I wasn't giving ground. Not now. "And compensation?" he asked after a moment. "Performance-based," I said, my voice sharp. "Not market average. I want it tied to the value I'm bringing in, not some baseline figure. No more company standard pay. I've been here long enough to know what I'm worth." He didn't argue, not at first. He was quiet for a long moment, likely trying to process what I'd just laid out. This wasn't just about the technical stuff anymore. It was about respect. And I wasn't going to settle for anything less. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight. "Fine," he said, almost reluctant. "You've got it. You'll report to me. We'll adjust compensation based on your performance. I'll have the legal team draft the contract." I could hear the unwillingness in his voice, but the agreement was there. He had no choice. The system had been my creation, and without me, they couldn't function. I wasn't asking for too much. I was asking for what I'd earned. "Good," I said, as calmly as I could manage. "I'll be there tomorrow." There was a moment of hesitation, and then he finally spoke again, softer this time. "Thank you, Rachel. I know I messed up, but I really do appreciate you agreeing to come back." I didn't respond to the apology, didn't offer anything in return. He could sort out his guilt later. The deal was done. "See you tomorrow," I said, and ended the call. I sat back for a moment, the phone still warm in my hand. There was no rush, no sense of victory in me. I hadn't done this to prove anything to him. I'd done it because I knew how much they needed me now, and how they'd never truly understood it until it was too late. The system worked exactly as I'd designed it, and now I was the one holding the keys. I walked into the office the next morning, just like I had 1,000 times before. No fanfare, no applause, no big reveal. Nothing, just a quiet, purposeful step back into a space I'd left behind too quickly. The receptionist nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me. I caught her wide-eyed stare as I passed, but I didn't stop. I just kept walking. The COO didn't look at me. In fact, he didn't even acknowledge me as I passed his office. He was sitting behind his desk, typing away, but I could tell he was fuming. Too bad for him. He'd dug his own grave. I didn't waste time with small talk. I headed straight for the boardroom, where everyone was already gathering for the meeting. I could feel the eyes on me as I walked past the empty cubicles, as if they were trying to make sense of why I was back, why I was the one walking into that room and not the guy they'd hired to replace me. When I reached the boardroom, the team was already milling about. I didn't wait for anyone to say anything. I walked in, set my bag down, and hooked up my laptop to the projector. I wasn't here for pleasantries. "All right," I said, as I brought up the real-time logistics dashboard. "Let's get to work." There was a collective shift in the room as the screen flickered to life. Data streamed across the screen. Current inventory levels, predictive restocking cycles, supply chain volatility alerts. I let them all stare at it for a few moments. Let them feel the weight of the system as it hummed quietly behind me. The thing they had been completely shut out of for days. I wasn't going to explain it, at least not right away. I just wanted them to see it, to understand it. This, I said, pointing to the screen, is the system. Real-time optimization, predictive analytics, decision-making power. I scrolled through a few more pages, showing them how it handled not just supply chain decisions, but vendor forecasting, inventory distribution, everything that kept this place moving. The information came from multiple sources, layered together into a seamless whole. A complex puzzle no one here had bothered to understand until they were locked out of it. Someone shifted uncomfortably in their chair. The COO was sitting at the far end of the table, arms crossed, still refusing to look at me. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he was fidgeting, but I wasn't giving him anything. He wasn't part of this conversation anymore, not while I was in charge. Now, I said, bringing up the security layer, let's talk about why this system is locked down the way it is. I clicked through to show them the biometric lock. 3 years ago, there was an inventory theft incident, a significant one. It wasn't just a lost shipment. It was intentional. It was internal. After that, I made sure only I had access to certain layers of the system. No one could bypass it, not without my credentials. I let the words hang in the air. They were starting to understand, starting to see what they'd lost and why it wasn't just a glitch or an outdated system. This was by design. I wasn't gone because they wanted to replace me. I was removed because they never took the time to understand why they needed me in the first place. I wasn't replaced, I said finally, keeping my voice steady. I was removed without thought, and now, here we are. The room was quiet, except for the soft clicking of my mouse. As I navigated through a few more layers of the system, I could feel the weight of their silence. The realization was setting in, and it wasn't pretty. The COO shifted uncomfortably, but I could tell he wasn't about to admit anything. No apology, no recognition, and that was fine. He didn't have to say anything. I ran through a few more critical functions, alerts for inventory shortages, automated vendor reports, predictive logistics models that adjusted in real time based on weather, traffic patterns, even geopolitical events. It wasn't magic. It was just something I built, something that kept the company afloat when things got complicated. When I was finished, I shut the laptop with a soft click. "Any questions?" I asked, standing there calmly, letting the quiet settle. The COO looked at me, still avoiding eye contact. I didn't care. I wasn't here to convince him. The system spoke for itself. The boardroom was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that stretched out just long enough for everyone to start realizing what had been laid bare. I'd walked them through the system, showed them its capabilities, the depth of what I'd built. It was clear that the company had been operating on borrowed time. Now, though, the hard questions were about to come. The CEO was sitting at the head of the table, his fingers tapping against the wood in a slow, measured rhythm. The rest of the board shifted in their seats, waiting. And then it came. The question that had been hanging in the air all morning. "Who authorized Rachel's termination?" one of the board members asked, voice sharp. "Because this has clearly set us back months, if not longer." The COO stiffened at the question. He was trying to hold it together, but the tension in his face was evident. He wasn't used to being pressed like this. He cleared his throat before speaking. "It was a decision I made, but it was based on—" The board member interrupted. "A decision you made without backup? Without any contingency plan?" The COO shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We didn't expect the system to be this integrated," he mumbled, glancing nervously toward the CEO. Another board member spoke up, more forcefully this time. "But why wasn't there a backup? Why wasn't anything documented? How could you let someone go without ensuring there was a plan in place for the future?" The COO opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then he tried again. "Rachel never documented the system properly," he said quickly, eyes darting toward me for just a second. "It was—" "Don't," I interrupted, standing up slowly. I wasn't about to let him shift the blame onto me. "I have the documentation. I have the email chains." I pulled my laptop forward, clicked through a few files, and then brought up the emails on the screen. You'll see here, we had multiple discussions about system management, about succession planning, but I was never brought in on any of those talks. I was never asked to train anyone for this role. I gestured to the chaos in front of me. This was never my fault. The board members exchanged looks, their expressions now a mix of disbelief and frustration. They hadn't expected me to come in with evidence, with facts that would put the COO's story into question. Where are the records? The board member pressed, leaning forward. Where is the documentation that shows this was communicated to the team? I clicked through to another email. Here, I said, pointing to the subject line. This was sent 6 months ago. I flagged that we were nearing a critical point where a succession plan should be in place, and I asked about formal knowledge transfer. The response I got was that things were fine. I scrolled through a few more emails, then looked up at the board, letting them absorb it. You weren't told because you weren't listening. That's not on me. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't just awkward silence. It was the kind of quiet you feel when someone has just dropped a bombshell and no one quite knows how to respond. The CEO's face had gone pale, and he wasn't even looking at the COO anymore. Instead, he turned to the board, his voice steady but filled with barely contained frustration. I want to make it clear, the CEO said, his gaze cold. I did not approve this termination. I was not consulted. And I certainly did not approve the handling of the system. He looked back at the COO, who was now sweating visibly. You acted without the board's knowledge and without executive approval. This is your mess to own, and it's your failure. The COO's face drained of color, and his mouth opened and closed in a futile attempt to explain himself. His eyes darted toward the door, then back to the board, but no one was buying it. He tried again, his voice weak. I didn't mean for it to. The CEO raised his hand, cutting him off. That's enough, he said, his voice firm. I'm done. You're done. The COO didn't have time to respond. A knock at the door interrupted the moment, and in walked 2 members of the legal team, holding a folder. They approached the COO without a word, and he knew what was coming. He looked from the folder to the board, then stood up shakily, his face a shade of gray. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, shoulders slumped. The door clicked shut behind him. The board didn't waste a second. Their eyes were all on me now, as if the storm had finally passed, and they could focus on the one person who had the answers. The room was still, heavy with anticipation. The CEO cleared his throat, then nodded toward me. Rachel, he said, his voice softer now. Thank you. I know this has been a mess, but we couldn't have fixed it without you. We're in your debt. I didn't need to hear more. I'd spent 18 years fixing problems they never even understood. But this was the part where the company realized just how much they depended on me, and I was done with being taken for granted. We need someone to guide the company moving forward, the CEO said, eyes meeting mine. Someone who understands this system, someone who can keep it running. We want you in a senior role, any title you want. No interference, no bottlenecks, complete trust. I let the words settle in the air. The offer was clear, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't hesitate. I'll take it, I said, calm but final. But I'm in charge. No more delays. And just like that, I wasn't just a part of the system. I was the one holding it together. I sat at the head of the table, watching the familiar hum of the system come to life behind me. The same system they had ignored, dismissed, and almost lost. But now it was mine again, and so was the room. The forecast data began to load, visuals blooming across the screen. The projections that had been absent for days, weeks really, appeared in real time, clear and sharp. Every line, every metric, was exactly where it should be. As the numbers shifted, I saw the tension in the room start to melt. The board's stiff posture relaxed, the collective sigh of relief audible even over the low buzz of the projector. No one said anything at first. They didn't need to. The system had spoken for itself. I didn't stand up, didn't give some grand victory speech. I just looked at them, every one of them, and said, "Let's get back on track." My voice was steady, without a hint of triumph. This wasn't about proving something to them. It was just about doing what needed to be done. I ran them through the system's real-time logistics, predictive algorithms, and the alerts that kept this company running without anyone else really understanding how. It was smooth, fluid, the way it had always been. For a moment, I could see them leaning in, actually paying attention, not the way they'd done before, when it was just background noise to them. This time, they were listening, really listening. As I moved through the session, no one interrupted. No one looked to the COO for guidance. For the first time, I wasn't the person in the background. I wasn't the one always making the fixes no one else understood. Now I was the one holding the map, and they were following me. The room was quiet except for the soft clicking of my mouse and the occasional comment as the data loaded and refreshed. They were watching it, taking in the complexity of the system that had been my responsibility all along. It was no longer just a tool. It was the backbone of the company. I wasn't a silent worker in the corner anymore. I was the foundation, the one who had been carrying them all without anyone realizing. By the time the session wrapped up, no one was looking at their phones or checking emails. Everyone had eyes on me, like they finally understood why things worked when I was in charge, and why they'd nearly crumbled without me. We'll need to do another round of testing for next quarter, I said, shifting the conversation forward. But for now, everything's running as it should. Let's keep it that way. The CEO nodded, his expression finally softening. We trust you, he said, his voice quieter now, like the weight of it all had finally sunk in. We should have done this from the beginning, I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The system was restored. The company was back on track. But more than that, they had finally realized who had always been holding it all together, and this time they were listening.